Luistertoets 2011, Engels B1, Good Practice Unit 1, onderdeel 1. Deborah Milton werkt op kantoor bij Benton Coffee. Je gaat luisteren naar wat er gebeurt bij haar op kantoor. De toets is verdeeld in fragmenten. Lees voor je gaat luisteren de vraag en de antwoordmogelijkheid. De toets begint nu.
Let's see. What am I supposed to do with this note for Mrs. Laborian? Ah, I see. She would like me to send a product catalogue to Mr. Hampstead from Mason Electronics. Oh, he must be the nice man she had a meeting with the other day. Mrs. Laborian mentioned he might be a new client. Better not make any mistakes then. Here we go. Dear Mr. Hampstead, we are very pleased to send you our catalogue, in which you will find... Oh, the news.
1.
Good afternoon. This is Hannah Smith from BAR Radio, bringing you today's latest local news. A teenage boy has been released on bail after being questioned by police about the supply of illegal drugs via the Facebook social media website. Police seized computer equipment and mobile phones during the arrest of the 17-year-old from Corby. Police said a Facebook page, which had more than 200 friends, was shut down. Officers said they will be taking part in activities in schools to promote internet.
2.
In Stamford, 5 men pretending to be police officers handcuffed a man and searched his flat and pub. The men climbed into the Crown Tavern in Blackfriars Street with a ladder. The 67-year-old victim was able to escape and call the police. The men, who were described as middle-aged, had the word police on their clothing. They left empty-handed, a police spokesman said. Anyone with information about the incident, which took place at about 6:15 on Sunday morning, please contact the police or Crime Stoppers.
3.
Plans for a new Tinko department store in the Leicestershire town of Colville have been approved by council planning officials. The company is one of 3 supermarkets which wanted to set up in Colville. The district council also considered bids from Asda and Sainsbury's. After handing in a new design, Tinko was given permission to build a store on a site between Whitwick Road and Hotel Street. The new superstore is expected to create about 300 jobs. As for the weather today, it will stay partly clouded with a speck of light drizzle in the late afternoon. Those were the latest headlines from BAR News. Have a nice day.
4.
Lucky I took the car this morning. At least I won't be rained upon like yesterday. I wonder what that new store is going to be like. Now, where was I? Please find enclosed. Yours sincerely. Good morning. Benton Coffee. This is Deborah speaking. What can I do for you?
Good morning. This is Dan McDoodles from Mason Electronics. I'd like to speak to the General Manager, please.
Our General Manager is Mrs. Laborian. I'm afraid Mrs. Laborian is not in at the moment. Can I take a message, Mr. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch your name. What did you say your name was?
It's McDoodles. Yes, you can take a message. Would you please tell Mrs. Laborian I'd like to make an appointment to discuss details of the agreement Mr. Hampstead made with her earlier this week.
I'll check her appointment book. Hold on, please. I'll be right back. Yes, here we are. Next week, you said? Oh, I'm afraid Mrs. Laborian is out of town most of next week. She's on a foreign business trip from Monday up to and including Wednesday. On Friday, she normally isn't in the office, so that leaves us with Thursday. Will Thursday the 22nd be all right with you?
5.
Well, I suppose so.
Shall we say at 1:15 in the afternoon?
Yes, that'll be fine, thank you.
Let me just write down your name, Mr. McDoodles. That's M-C-D-O-O-L...
No. M-C-D-E-W-D-A-L-L-S.
Oh, I'm sorry. D-E-W-D-A-L-L-S. I've got it now. From Mason Electronics.
6.
And it's about the agreement with Mr. Hampstead, right? Oh, that's a coincidence. I'm just about to send a letter to him with the catalogue of our products.
Well, you might send it to me instead of him. He was taken ill last week, you see. He won't be back for quite a while, and I'm taking over his work. The problem is, he hasn't left me much to go on, because he hadn't come around to putting things in writing yet.
Oh, dear. I'm sorry to hear that. He seemed all right when he was here a while ago. I do hope he'll recover soon. Well, I'll make sure to send you a catalogue then as well, shall I?
I'd really appreciate that, thanks. Deborah, wasn't it? Well, goodbye for now, and I'll see you next week then.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McDoodles. Have a nice day.
7.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Laborian.
Hi, Deborah. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Just finishing up the letter you asked me to write for Mr. Hampstead from Mason's. Actually, his colleague, Mr. McDougall's, called a while ago to make an appointment with you next week. He's taking over Mr. Hampstead's work because apparently Mr. Hampstead is ill.
Oh, dear. I hope it's nothing too serious. I thought he looked fine when he was here last week.
That's what I said as well. I'm sending Mr. McDougall's a catalogue too.
Thank you, Deborah. Well done. I suppose this Mr. McDougall's will be our contact at Mason's then? Mason Electronics will be a big client if all goes well. They are interested specifically in our coffee and tea machines for the canteens in all their department stores.
8.
The only problem is that the majority of the staff don't want the canteen ladies replaced. They think that the coffee tastes better made by hand and poured by hand as well. What do you think about that?
Well, I can imagine the staff prefer a canteen lady over a machine. Because of the personal touch, of course. But they probably don't realise our machines make lovely coffee. And tea.
You're so right. We should go to the canteens and have the staff try our coffee. That will convince them. Very good, Deborah. Well, I'm going to arrange that right away. What was his name again? McDoodles, you said?
Yes, that's right. Phew, a bit too honest there. Lucky she misunderstood. Who in his right mind would replace a nice canteen lady by a machine?
9. Einde van onderdeel 1. Onderdeel 2 van de toets. Je gaat luisteren naar de ervaringen van een vrijwilligster bij de EHBO. De toets gaat verder bij vraag 10.
My parents were volunteer emergency medical technicians, or EMTs, for 20 years, so I expected I would be great at the job. I certainly had my parents' support. When I mentioned to my mom in 1996 that I was thinking of becoming an EMT, she almost picked me up and carried me into the training hall right down the block from our house on Eaton Court in Garretson Beach. I imagined that I would be like my mother, a technically competent EMT, who also was not afraid to get dirty and who was good at giving mental first aid. Instead, I was more like my father, who looked like Super Mario and got almost perfect test scores, but was not so great with real patients. Still, I had a good stretcher-side manner, and I could bandage as well as anyone. I loved walking onto an accident scene and knowing exactly what I was supposed to do. I felt like Dr. Cameron, the caring medical specialist in the television series House.
10.
Garretson Beach is a tiny corner of southern Brooklyn, and our unit, the Garretson Beach Volunteer Fire Department and Ambulance Service, had only one ambulance. If a call came in when the ambulance was already out and more than 5 minutes away, we went to the scene in the rescue truck, treated the patient, and then signed the patient over to the city's EMTs when they arrived. That's what happened one day in the late 1990s with John, a 75-year-old who was lying on the couch of his home in his pajamas, light green as I remember, when we arrived. He reminded me of the men in my Grandpa Tom's bridge club, all gray hair, thick glasses, and hearty laughs. He had been having chest pains, and as it turned out, he had undergone a bypass surgery less than a week before.
11.
The officer of my crew gathered John's relatives into the dining room to give us privacy. Our driver helped me to take John's life signs. His blood pressure was low, but acceptable. His breathing was coming often enough, and his pulse was fine. We gave him oxygen, and I smiled reassuringly to let him know that this kid in jeans and a sweatshirt, I'm short and blonde, and was in my mid-20s, was capable of taking care of him. He closed his eyes to rest while we waited for the ambulance. Although his heartbeat seemed okay, his condition seemed to worsen, so I very much wanted John to be on his way to the emergency room at Coney Island Hospital less than 10 minutes away. I knelt beside him, keeping my fingers on his wrist, constantly feeling his pulse. There was nothing to do but wait.
12.
Then, however, as I looked at his face through the oxygen mask, it seemed as if John wasn't breathing regularly. I asked our driver to take a look. When a person has difficulty breathing, his pulse soon weakens. I was not sure what was going on, because I'd been an EMT for only 2 years and went on a few calls a week instead of a few a day. I hadn't built up much experience. The driver, who was about my age, was even greener than I was and had somewhat less medical training. The officer had 15 years on us, but she was dealing with the family. The driver moved the patient's mask aside and called his name loudly. John took a deep, gasping breath. Relieved that he was at least breathing, we relaxed a bit. After another minute, the city ambulance stopped outside and a clean-cut uniformed EMT appeared behind me. "He's taking a few gasping breaths a minute, but his pulse is good," I said, trying to sound confident. The man exchanged a look with his partner.
13.
The two city EMTs had John moved to the floor in case we needed to give him CPR, an electric shock to get his heart going again, should it stop beating. They attached their instrument to his chest. I moved my hands away because I knew that anyone touching a patient would have his or her pulse appear on the monitor too. But the partner waved me back toward the patient. I put my hand back on John's wrist, and when I looked at the monitor, I immediately knew why I had been motioned back. There was only one pulse, mine. John's heart had stopped sometime in the last few minutes, and I had done nothing because I'd thought that my heartbeat was his. When John's pulse was beating, the pulse in my fingertip was weaker than the one in his wrist. So when I took his pulse, I felt the beat in his wrist instead of the one in my own finger. But when John had no pulse, I could still feel a thump against my fingertips. Experienced people could tell the difference easily. The rest of us had to learn.
14.
The EMTs had me start CPR. If I had started it sooner, I thought to myself, John would have had a better chance. Also, he was still swollen from the surgery he'd had a few days earlier, and his chest, covered in stitches, felt like foam rubber. Soon, still hoping, we were speeding with John and the ambulance toward the hospital. Later that night, I told my mother about confusing my pulse and John's. She said I wasn't the first person to make that mistake. She was offering me a way out of my guilty feeling. But I didn't think I deserved it. The next day, John's family called to let us know that he had died. I wasn't surprised. In my first class, one of the students had asked the instructor, "What if we kill someone?" "You can't kill a patient," the instructor had answered. We weren't doctors or even paramedics. There was no danger of our giving someone the wrong drug or making some other mistake that could be fatal. "You can only fail to save them," the instructor said. That's exactly what I knew I had done.
15. Einde van de toets.